Hello guys, welcome to my first podcast episode. The setup is definitely not the best at the moment. I'm back on my phone because I didn't know how to connect my microphone to my usual camera. This is my first time using this microphone, so I'm very worried it will cut out or something. I also have this lovely fire hazard next to me because I thought that it would make it a bit more intimate and a bit more scenic, but I kind of feel like it just looks a bit weird and out of place. Today we have something that I really wanted to speak about for quite a while, and I actually used to speak a lot about on TikTok. But then while I was writing my plan for today, I went back to look at my TikTok to watch some of my old videos talking about this thing, and then I realized I had deleted all of them because I had ultimately decided that I felt like this was a bit too vulnerable to talk about. However, I've clearly changed my mind because today I'm back to talk about it. I want to talk about the idea that we are all constantly changing. And what's a little bit difficult, I think, about talking about this subject is that it is very philosophical by nature, which leads me to worry when I'm kind of explaining how I reached certain conclusions, because I'm sure I've made some sort of logical, deductive reasoning mistake somewhere along the line. So if you're watching this and you're very, very clever and you catch some huge mistake I've made with my reasoning, do please let me know, because I would like to improve, but also try to interpret all of what I'm going to say in a bit more of an artistic way maybe, because this is definitely not supposed to be my ironclad philosophy about metaphysics and actually the definition of the self. This is more so a kind of attitude towards life and towards my identity and how I interact with other people that I've found extremely beneficial. So that's why I really want to share it. Beyond just the idea of us being change, me being change, you being change, there are a lot of kind of secondary thoughts that have spawned from that original thought. So I want to talk about how I reached that original thought and other things that have come from that. I have found this kind of very fluid way of viewing myself and others to have really improved certain aspects of my anxiety, the way I can interact with other people, and I also feel the richness of life that I'm able to experience. I feel ultimately it's been a really, really positive thing. So yeah, I really want to share it, and hopefully I won't delete it like I deleted all my TikToks about it. So yeah, enjoy. I think growing up I had a very rigid view of who I thought I was. Perhaps maybe not that rigid, I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit unfair on myself, especially because I think it's very natural to, as humans, categorize things and label things. I think it's kind of the easiest way to make sense of all this sensory data and all this information that we have to process. Some context that might be necessary is that I am not religious, although I kind of was growing up. I'd say I kind of just assumed that I was religious because I had grown up in a religious setting, and I was also kind of weirdly religious, where my mum was Christian, she was Catholic, well she is Catholic, and my dad was Buddhist, and he also was a monk, which is really cool. And I kind of I feel in the way that sometimes you'll hear kids say, instead of oh, I'm half English, for example, and half Japanese because one parent is English and one Japanese, they'll say I'm half Christian and I'm half Buddhist because my mum is Christian and my dad is Buddhist. That's what I used to say, and I feel that is a really good representation of my attitude towards religion growing up and the way in which I was religious. It really wasn't something that I'd ever really identified with that strongly, and I'd never really thought about too much until I started studying philosophy, and then I had to really kind of come head to head with a lot of these opinions I had and a lot of these views I had and a lot of these kind of things I believed in, and I ultimately realized that I am not religious, and also I don't believe in a soul or anything like that. I am a materialist. I don't believe that there is a mind or a soul that's separate to the body and the brain. I don't know how relevant that context will be, but for how I kind of reached the conclusion that all I am is change and I'm not really definable, maybe it would be different if I had different views. So that's a little bit of a kind of precursor to then what led me to question all these things. So at some point, because I didn't believe in a soul, but I was uncomfortable with the idea that I wasn't something that was fixed. I don't know, it's weird because I feel there is this kind of abstract idea of Alex that I do feel surely is a real thing, or at least I did. But because I didn't feel I could label it the soul because I didn't believe in a soul, I would kind of label it as essence almost. I believe there was an essence of Alex. And then one day I was that is such a lazy way to view this because I'm just using the word essence to be a placeholder for something that I've not really investigated and I don't really understand. And I'm really, really bored today. So let's have a think about what I mean by essence. So I tried really, really hard to define myself. And I started off by trying to define myself through characteristics and labels, because I feel that's the easiest way to do it, and I feel that's probably the way that I subconsciously do it the most, especially with other people, labeling someone as a very kind person, labeling someone as a very lazy person, labeling someone as a this kind of person or that kind of person, and I must do that somewhere deep down with myself. So then I tried, okay, for example, I'm a really selfish person. oh, that's not really like a fixed thing. That doesn't really work. First of all, because a lot of characteristics are subjective. I might think that a certain thing I've done is really, really selfish and like awful and blah, 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 but someone else seeing that same situation might not think that. And also, like, in order for that act to be selfish, it needs to be selfish in the context of a situation. And if you'd taken that act in a different situation, it might not have been selfish. And it's just very like context dependent and also very subjective. Secondly, though, and perhaps like more importantly for today, it is also something that is fleeting. I don't have to be selfish just because I've been selfish momentarily. Even if I've been selfish all of my life, I could just stop being selfish one day. And I realized that I had this very big problem with defining myself, like myself as almost this idea that I believe to like exist for eternity. There was such an issue with labeling it through characteristics because I have the potential to be anything. I have the potential to be absolutely anything. I could be selfish all of my life, even if I don't choose to magically from like my own brilliant will choose to become a brilliant person and be really, really selfless, if you believe that to be a good thing. I could just have like a crazy accident, get hit in the head and have like a massive personality change. I am not bound to any of these characteristics that people think I have for life. And so I was like, damn, okay, clearly characteristics doesn't work. I kind of like that idea of me having the potential to be anything. But then I took it a bit further, which like I don't think you have to take it this far. And also here's where I assume I probably might do, like my philosophy and my like logic and my like reasoning is a little bit like messy here. It's a bit lazy here. So definitely like take this more in as an art rather than an actual like premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, premise 4. I think I started to feel also uncomfortable with the idea of potential, because I feel like me saying, okay, right now I'm super, super selfish, but I could be selfless. Okay, but I could also be selfish for the rest of my life. Like, I feel like this idea of I could potentially be anything is kind of bullshit, because yeah, you could potentially be anything, but you also might potentially never change. You also might potentially be nothing. I feel like it's kind of lazy to view myself as the potential to be anything, because that doesn't really mean anything. And I feel like it was a bit lazy to assume my identity and link my identity to the idea of being anything, if that makes sense. I feel like I've explained that really poorly. But from that, I kind of was like, okay, I don't really feel comfortable with the idea of potentially being anything. So all that I really am is all I am in actuality. And because I can always change, all I am in actuality is all I am right now in this moment. And right now in this moment, if I take a breath, I'm not really anything. I'm not really anything. Even if I'm doing things, it's also fleeting. The moment's constantly escaping me. So I don't know. This is where I think it's a bit lazy, and I've definitely made some sort of mistake. But I, for some reason, felt really, really comforted by the idea that I'm not really anything. I'm just this constantly changing thing that is just constantly trying to grasp onto the moment and losing it. I'm here, and then one day I'll be dead, and I'm not going to be here. And I feel like for some people that might sound a bit morbid and a bit existential, but for me, that gives me so much comfort. I think perhaps an easier way to understand it, especially because I'm saying like, oh, if like the philosophy is really shit, please like, you know, give me the benefit of the doubt and understand it artistically. So rather than explaining it to you guys in that kind of like logical step by step, which was very illogical, I just kind of try to use the metaphor of like water. Like all I am is fluid, and everyone around me is fluid. And now I want to get into why I think that has made such a big change in my life, in the way that I interact with people and interact with myself and understand like my place in the world and la 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 la. So a big thing that changed was how I think I'm able to interact with other people and love other people. Where I'm sure that I must have been subconsciously labeling myself as a certain person, I also must have been doing it with other people, and I think I was. But I think one limitation of labeling people as certain kinds of people is that you start to expect certain behavior for people. And an issue with that, and again, this might not even be an issue, but this is just something that I've found personally for me, is that if, for example, person A I assumed to be a certain kind of person, and they were to do a certain action, I would think, oh, well, obviously they've done this action because they're this kind of person. Before I've even had a chance to process what they've really done or the things they've said or the way that they've come across to me, I've already smushed it together so that it fits perfectly into my idea of this person that I've already come up with. And so I'm not really processing their behavior for what it is, even though, and this is like, okay, so I kind of almost hate talking about this kind of stuff, because I feel like you can always take it too far and you can always be really annoying when you're like thinking about philosophy and this kind of stuff. But like, I've never actually met anyone. This is like a tangent now. As I was thinking about this, I've never met anyone. And I feel this a lot when I'm online and when I hear people talk about the way that they feel about me and stuff, because I'm like, oh, I'm obviously really flattered, and I recognize that it must be like something to do with me because I'm the one that is making these videos and choosing what to talk about and choosing how to edit them and la la la. But the way that you guys are taking me in is very limited compared to if you were to sit in my room with me and talk to me and like, you know, see me in 3D and see me without all of the like, I skip all of my like long breaths and stuff. But even the people who are speaking to me in my room, even my partner and my best friend, who are two people that I have been insane insanely vulnerable with, they too have not actually met me, because they are still getting a very, very limited version of Alex. They still are also processing, it's their interpretation of Alex. I don't know my best friend truly, I just know my interpretation of her, and it's probably, hopefully, a somewhat accurate interpretation of her, I'd like to hope, but I don't know. Again, like, I don't know if there even is a her. Who the fuck is she? Who is she? I can't label her as anything. Anyways, and then it all just goes in circles, la la la. Back to my original point now. I think that when I would label people as certain kinds of people, I would really, I don't know, I was always just kind of like affirming my own belief I had about that person already, and I feel like that makes life really, really boring. So when I practice, and it's obviously hard because I think so much of this is subconscious, and also like we need to do this in order to label people and categorize people and also just like make sense of the things that we are seeing. But when I made a very conscious effort to try to not jump to like, you did this because you are blah blah blah, and I think of you as blah blah blah, and when I tried to just like observe people and allow them to do something and to not label it and to not jump on it and be like, oh, it's because of this reason, but just to like accept the action for what it was, I don't know, I really did feel like it's changed the way that I see people and I view people and the way in which I'm able to interact with people. First of all, I think that I am able to be kinder to people because I am able to, for example, trust if someone is changing, which obviously a lot of the time people will say they change, but then they don't actually change. And it's probably good to have like a little bit of apprehension if someone's really, really hurt you and they're saying that they're changed and they've like not really changed. But on the other side, I think often people will explain to me why they've done something, or they will say that they really want to change, or they will say that they have changed. But if I have a really, really fixed idea of what they are and how they've and why they've done certain things, I will very easily interpret all of their future behavior through this idea that I already have of them, and then I won't believe they've actually changed even if they have. So I feel like this allows me to be a lot more open-minded. Also, I feel like people are so much more complex than I allow them to be, because again, my brain cannot comprehend all of the complexities of all the people. But I feel like in being very lazy with how quickly I label people, I do miss out on a lot of complexity that I actually can process. And I feel like by not really having ideas of who someone is, it's nice because rather than having to come up with a logical reason as to why someone's acting different one day and having to kind of come up with this story and having to explain why someone's gone from point A to point B, I can just allow someone to suddenly be point B and I'm not going to ask any questions. And I feel like that makes life a lot funner and a lot more exciting, and also my relationships a lot richer, because people can be so many things and people can surprise me and people can change, and I don't have to really like, I don't know, I don't have to look into it too much, and I don't have to come up with a reason why they've changed. I don't know why they've changed, but it's really, really cool to see people have so many faces. Another thing, and this is kind of linking more now to the personal experience, I feel like not expecting myself to be anything continuous and also not having these labels for myself has really helped with my anxiety. I kind of feel like before I had to explain myself to myself, whereas now that I understand that like I'm not really anything fixed, and I do, if you know, I look back to my behavior in the past, I do definitely see patterns and I see kind of groups of characteristics that seem to kind of pop up time and time again, but I don't feel like I have to keep telling myself that story almost. I don't know, I feel like having to keep kind of recalling why I'm a certain kind of person, it does take a bit of mental energy, and in order to kind of build this picture of who I am, I have to keep thinking back the things that I've already passed and gone. So it's really, really nice to kind of just allow myself to be in the present and to not ask myself too many questions and kind of leave myself alone a bit, and I think that's been really, really nice. This is also very random, but like literally a few days ago I made a bit of a breakthrough as to why I get anxious, and I really want to talk about that. Also, like growing up I had really, really bad anxiety, but I don't have anxiety as like an anxiety disorder anymore, so do keep that in mind. Nowadays all I get is I just get almost like flare-ups where I don't know, suddenly something will kind of set me off and I'll be really, really anxious like I used to be growing up, but only for a short period of time, and then it will kind of resolve itself. But recently I was very, very anxious, and I was really trying to get to the bottom of like, why am I so anxious? Why am I so freaking out? And then I realized that I had always thought that my anxiety was to do with control, and that I wanted to be in control of situations and I wanted to have control, and you know, did this person say this about me, and I had to like be in control of like my image and how people saw me, and also if everyone liked me, and why don't you like me, and are you sure I didn't upset you, and all of this stuff was ultimately linked with control. However, I've realized I think it's a bit more meta than that. Rather than just being in control, I think my anxiety is to do with entitlement to control. Recently, I was meeting an online friend, I guess, and I was really nervous. Oh my goodness, I nearly vomited beforehand because I was so stressed. And I was like writing in my journal because I really couldn't make sense of my thoughts, so I had to kind of like see my thoughts linearly in order to make sense of them. I was writing, and at first I was saying, I think that I'm anxious, and I thought I'd cracked it at this point. I was like, I think I'm anxious because I don't want to disappoint her, because she must have, in order to have asked to meet me, she must have some sort of idea of what I must be like. And imagine I don't live up to that. That's a bit embarrassing, and it would be a bit of a waste of time for her. And I'm sorry for her if she's come all the way to meet me, or she's not come all the way to meet me, she came for other reasons. But if like she's kind of taken time out of her day to meet me and I'm a disappointment and I don't really want to do that, and also I'm a bit embarrassed. But then the kind of like, I'm a bit embarrassed about that thing stood out to me, and I tried to investigate it further, and I realized ultimately what I was anxious about was that I didn't think that I could be the kind of person to cause her disappointment, because realistically everyone's going to meet people they don't like. Everyone's going to meet people who they're maybe excited to meet and then end up not really like being that fun, or not really being what they thought they'd be, and you know, just not really having a good time. I've met lots of people that like unfortunately are just not really my cup of tea through no fault of their own. They're just not really my kind of person, and this person of course is going to meet those kinds of people. But I felt like that can't be me. I felt an almost like entitlement to not being that kind of person. So then I was like, look, Alex, why are you more entitled to not being a disappointment than other people in this person's life? I'm no better than anyone else. I'm no different to anyone else. And for some reason that really, really helped, because I was like, wait, if someone has to be a disappointment to this person because someone's going to be, why not me? And for some reason that really, really fixed it. So yeah, I do think that my anxiety was probably more so like an entitlement to control rather than control. But anyways, that's like totally off topic now. I just feel like in general, I don't know, this like view of myself as a very, very fixed thing is just very stressful, because there's a lot to live up to as well. Okay, actually kind of linking to what I just said, perhaps that wasn't a completely useless tangent. I feel like that is my personal anxiety hack, and that is the thing that has made my life a lot easier, is this idea of myself as this thing that isn't particularly special, this thing that isn't particularly worthy of anything, and not because I'm not worthy and not in a like depressive way, but because why would I be anything different to anything else that's alive? And I feel like perhaps labeling things just kind of like makes me very focused on myself as something that's like grand and big, even when it used to be very negative things, because I used to have an issue where I truly believed growing up that I was the most evil person alive. I did do bad things, like I do remember why I like logically reached that conclusion, but the ridiculous thing is that I also was like, I guess, quite a forgiving person growing up, in the sense that if other people told me bad stuff they did, bad, obviously that's also subjective, but bad things they did, I'd be like, yeah, that's okay, like I you know, that's okay, like as long as you try to change, la 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 la. I don't know why I didn't extend that same grace for myself, and also why I thought I was like the number one most evil person on earth. This is a bit deep, but I remember my therapist when I was growing up at the end of each session would say like, you are a good person, and I would scoff. It would make me so uncomfortable that I would laugh in her face, because I genuinely was convinced she was lying, or I was convinced that she was an idiot. Sometimes I would think like, why would you say that? Like, why would you like lie straight out of your mouth and say I'm a good person when you know I'm not? And sometimes I'd be like, fuck, I need to get a new therapist. Like, she clearly doesn't know what's up if she thinks I'm a good person. And obviously looking back, that's a bit ridiculous that I had such a dramatic view of myself. But I think even though that obviously is a negative thing, and you'd kind of assume like, oh, if I thought that, I'd probably like be quite a humble person, because, you know, I think of myself as so lowly. But I don't think I was humble at all, because I thought of myself as the worst person on earth. I did kind of think of myself as this like grand thing in a way, and I really feel like the true way to be humble is just to not really think of yourself as like anything. And again, not in a sad way, in just the like, I don't know, I feel so much more focused on my environment and the people around me, and I feel so much more zen, and I feel so much more tied to the present as well, because when someone does something outlandish, I'm not here thinking like, oh, but you used to be this kind of person, and oh my god, like my whole worldview is like falling apart and crumbling. It's just like, oh my god, you kind of did something outlandish, I didn't really like that. Or like, oh wow, you did something outlandish, that's hilarious. Yeah, I feel like I'm less focused on all these stupid semantics. Like, I don't know, I think words, as great as they are and as important it is to communicate with each other, and obviously like words are really, really great, because, you know, I'm here talking to you guys right now, and I'm able to tell my partner that I love them so, so much, and I'm able to talk to my best friend about something that's been on my mind. It's also kind of like, I feel like it takes so much processing power sometimes to register things through language that it's really nice to practice. This is again very off topic. I actually really shouldn't make a podcast, to be honest, because I've also like had barely any coffee today. So the ADHD is like, I'm like the thoughts are kind of coming at me and they're not really linked, so I'm very, very sorry. But I feel like language in a way can be very limiting, because it takes so much processing power to have to use language, and also it almost like adds another layer to reality. Sometimes a little trick I like to do if I'm really struggling to meditate, or I'm struggling to be present and I'm just like really in my mind, is I try to take away the authority of language. I'm just like, okay, like I can't process anything through language now, language doesn't exist. And then I feel so aware of my environment and my surroundings in a very different way, but in a way that feels very like so raw. Like I feel like I'm just taking in all the raw sensory data, and right now I'm looking at this candle and I'm not thinking candle and I'm not thinking anything. I mean, I am, because I'm saying this, but if I try to do that, there is just something that exists there, and I'm aware of it without having to label that awareness. And I feel like that's really great as well. And I feel like that does link also to the kind of like, why am I labeling myself? Why am I labeling myself? I can just experience myself, and I just am, and I exist, and that's brilliant. And I'm also going to die soon. I don't want to waste so much time trying to figure myself out. I don't think I ever will, because I'm always changing. So the moment I come up with one definition, that definition can very well just go away. But also, I just don't want to waste that time trying to crack the code, because I don't need to. I can just be inside myself. I don't need to know myself. I don't like this idea of having to kind of figure myself out as like, I don't know, almost like a literary figure that I'm like constantly analysing, and I'm reading Reddit reviews about, and I'm reading like, you know, what do other people think about this character, that like, what do we think about the symbolism of this character? I'm not a character, I'm an animal, you know, and I kind of feel like, I don't know, it's just so nice to let myself be, and to be inside this body. I don't know, it's a bit weird like talking about this while like looking at myself, but if I don't look at myself, to be inside this body and exist and just be aware of everything around me, and be in relationships with people, and I mean non-romantically as well, I mean like general relationships with people, even fleeting moments of like, I don't know, talking to a stranger or looking at a stranger, just being aware of them, and then looking away at the next thing, and then looking away at the next thing, and not having to make sense and make a story and make a chronological, linear, like, tale about all of the things that have happened. I just want to be here, man, you know? I'm gonna fucking die. And that freaks me out so much. I get so existential, and I really feel like the hack to end existentialism is to just be here. Oh my gosh, I've really not followed my, like, I've not got a script, but I've written out a bunch of ideas I had. I do want to finish with, like, a last kind of thing, which is that often I talk about, in my personal life as well, about how I have these views, and also I'm a determinist, which is kind of controversial, so I'm not going to go into that much. Something that I'm kind of left with is like, well, what inspires me to be a better person? Why should I be good if the word good doesn't even mean anything, and also I'm constantly changing, and I can't even label myself as good, and also I don't have free will, and also I don't have a soul? Why would I be good? But I do have reasons why, and rather than trying to explain them, because I'm clearly not very good at that, because I don't know if anyone will even watch this, I want to call on 2 books that I've read that I feel like really beautifully explain why. So the first one, I'm going to do a horrible job because I don't have the book anymore. I gave it to someone and I didn't even finish the book, and I also barely remember the quote, so I'm just going to try to explain what the author was getting at. And that was Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. There's this moment where the main character is saying that everything we do in this life matters, but not because there's some god that's judging us, and not because anyone's watching to make sure that we're being good and no one's going to punish us afterwards, but because through our actions we are building the life that then we need to live in. We need to experience this life that we are building, so why not build it to be really, really nice and wonderful? And I think when I first read that, I was like, fuck yes. And then similarly, I have got the Dhammapada, which I'm currently reading, but I'm like really, really near the start. It's a really, really beautiful cover. Literally the first part of it explains like exactly this. So number 1, contrary ways. What we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow. Our life is the creation of our mind. If a man speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows him as the wheel of the cart follows the beast that draws the cart. What we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow. Our life is the creation of our mind. If a man speaks or acts with a pure mind, joy follows him as his own shadow. And yeah, that basically sums it up. I thank you, the Dhammapada, for perfectly saying what I mean. I still want to be kind, and I still want to be good, and I still want to love people, and I still want to have boundaries and all of these things, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that has to experience this. I'm the one that has to be inside this mind. And I have been inside this mind when I used to be very, very jealous and bitter and nasty, and I used to be a really, really spiteful person. I used to be a really anxious person. I used to be a very angry person. And I could be. I don't believe that there's a God afterwards who's going to judge me for that. I just think I'm going to die. I just think I'm going to die and nothing's going to happen. But I have to be inside this body while I'm feeling horrible, and I feel angry and I feel bitter all the time, and it's just not fun. It's just so not fun. It's not enjoyable at all. And since I've kind of tried to be better, and I feel like also I've like chilled out a lot, and that has helped me to like give me the room to be better, because I also think before I was in a lot of pain and I was suffering a lot, and it was actually very, very hard for me to imagine a life where I wasn't so angry and I wasn't so upset, and I wasn't so spiteful. But now that I'm able to, life is so fucking blessed. Life is so fucking blessed. Why would I not want to try and be a better person? Because if I'm a horrible person, I have to live inside this body. And obviously that's a very selfish way. Like beyond that also, like I am an emotional creature and I love people. So I'm sure like I'm also partly driven by the fact that I just really love people, and it does really, really upset me when I see people suffer. So why would I kind of want to add to that suffering? But just because sometimes I hear people say like, oh, well, if you don't believe in free will, and if you like don't believe in like a soul, and you don't believe in good and bad, and you don't believe in God, then why would you want to be good? I still think there's plenty of reasons to want to be good. But yeah. Anyways, this is this has been such a horrible first podcast. I'm really sorry. I think I chose a really shit topic, to be honest, because as much as I really wanted to talk about this, I feel like I have spoken about this too much a few years ago when I first kind of like was like, wow, I cracked this case, but it was actually kind of all like fake deep, and I feel like a lot of people feel this way and just like, I don't know, don't make such a big fuss about it as I do. But I feel like because I spoke about it so much, I kind of like spoke myself in circles, and then afterwards I didn't think about it for like quite a while now. I think when I made those TikToks about it, it was when I first made a TikTok, and that was like a year ago, and then I haven't really thought about it since, so I feel like this was really all over the place. But I don't know, hopefully this was somewhat enjoyable for you guys. Hopefully also I made sense. Please let me know if there's anything you'd want me to talk about, and please let me know your thoughts on this, because I do think it's like maybe a bit of a controversial topic, and I definitely have some views that I'm sure people don't agree with. So let me know what you think, and let me know what drives you, and let me know how you view yourself and how you view relationships, although that probably, I assume you'll be replying in the form of YouTube comment, and I don't know if there'll be room for all of that, because I assume that might be quite a lot to type. But if you can be bothered to type, please do, because I do actually read all the comments, and I really love reading them, and especially sometimes you guys have like some really insightful, crazy, interesting views, so please do let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Please like and subscribe and comment, and yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Bye bye.